So today's project, while I'm waiting for the hardtop stuff to arrive, is to remove the cockpit speaker and glass it over. We'll come back at another date and do the gel coating on top of it, but for now we'll take it out, stick in the fiberglass and let it cure. I've already got the speaker out on the starboard side. I did that off camera just in case I messed something up, but now we'll move on to the port side. The most unfortunate thing about the positioning of these speakers is that they allow water in when it rains in a particular direction. If I put in new speakers, they're not going to go where they can let water in. They'll probably be on the pedestal with the steering wheel or something, maybe even part of my hardtop. I just don't understand why they thought that it was a good idea to cut a giant hole in the boat where water can seep in and rot the wood behind it. This has been a project that I meant to do when I first bought the boat 3 years ago, and we're finally getting to it. I kind of procrastinated on this one. Now, in order to get things to adhere, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of rough it up on the backside here. That's also kind of cleaning off some of the dirt and dust that might be back there. When I did the other side, I went ahead and made a flat fiberglass piece. This piece will sit inside of the hole, and we'll build up more layers of fiberglass on top of it. But for now, I need to rough it up on both sides. I do need to also cut it to shape. Since it is so thin, we can actually do that with a pair of scissors. Because this is acting as a base for more fiberglass, we don't actually need it to be perfect. It's okay if it has some bigger gaps than it needs. What we'll do in a minute, is we'll actually glue in some pieces of wood that will really be the base of support, and then we'll fiberglass in this on top of those. I'm going to be using a leftover bit of stir stick as my wood. I'm just going to get 2 pieces of that, and now I need to mix up some epoxy, and I'd like it to actually be thickened epoxy, so I'm going to go ahead and also add in some of my silica filler. I'd like a little bit thicker consistency than that, so I'm going to add in probably 2 more spoonfuls. Now the good thing about using it when it's this thick is that it'll kind of act more of like a paste or putty. If you use it too thin, then it becomes really difficult to glue things together like this and hold them in place. So we'll take 1 piece of wood and smear a little bit of that thickened epoxy on there and stick it in. Look at that. The last time I did this, I didn't have it thickened, and it became darn near impossible to get these to stick. Once I had them on there, they would just kind of fall off after a couple minutes. So we're gonna let that sit for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and glue that in place. Hopefully the epoxy will be still a little bit wet by then, and we can still use it. So now these are in tacky enough that I can set this in. So I've also gone ahead and cut out a bunch of circles of fiberglass. We're gonna mix up 1 batch of resin, stick that in, and then just immediately going to start going on with the matte glass here. So I'll probably mix up enough for all of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 pumps should do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I want to take my time, make sure I get it nice and mixed. We're not going to thicken this batch, we're just going to go ahead and throw it on as is in a nice thin amount. Okay. Stick that back in there. All right, so now our base is set. So I'm going to start taking these and wetting them out on the piece of plywood here, and then we'll pick them up and stick them in place. Now, because of the weird angle that the hole is at, I can't really do this once these are in place, so that's why I'm doing them on the board, and then I'll pick them up and stick them on as best as I can. It's probably the more annoying part of all this is just the geometry that I'm dealing with. But in an ideal situation, you would want to be able to work all the air bubbles out of each layer as they are getting stuck on. But it'll be okay. This is not really a high structure area on the boat where it needs to be, you know, perfect. All right, we'll just keep on building up thickness like that. And being very careful not to spill all over the place. And when we get to the end of this part, I'm actually going to be putting fairing compound on top after this is cured and I've sanded it all down. So if there's still a gap, that's okay. That'll get filled in later on the back end. Right. I'm going to take the rest of this and kind of build up a big old wedge of fiberglass that I can stick in there. All right. It looks like a mess, and it is, but it's okay because we're going to come back and fill that in after the initial layers here are cured. It's always a pain filling in a hole like this just because of the way it is. I don't know, if you guys have any better ideas, I'd say let me know, but it'll be too late by the time you do. I'm just going to keep on going the way that I've been going. So I've had to clean up the area a bit here. This side was actually sagging out, and what I did is I cut it out and then re-glued that piece in to make it more flush with everything else. So instead of going in with more fiberglass sheets, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a thickened epoxy. I've got my microfibers and colloidal silica, so I'll be blending these two with the epoxy to make a thick paste. We're going to fill in this hole as best as we can and then come over it with the plastic spatula, make it flat, and let it cure. So when I'm thickening this, I'm actually going to start with the microfiber, and then we'll add in the silica second. No particular reason for that, I just decided that is how I'm going to do it. And if you're doing this indoors, you want to make sure that you have a mask on so that you don't breathe any of that in. And just cover it with my hand to make sure it doesn't fly away. Okay. Now the difference between the microfibers and the silica is that the silica is a microscopic ball, whereas the microfibers are just that, they're tiny little fibers. So these are actually more like a fiberglass composite, where you end up with tiny little fibers of glass going every which way and giving it a lot of strength. The silica is great for lightening it and thickening it because those little bubbles of silica, they don't really do much for strength as much as they do for just taking up volume. We want to go for a peanut butter consistency today because this is a vertical element. We need to make sure that it won't sag as it's curing. So right now we're at probably a warm mayonnaise right there. I'd like to get it more to a peanut butter. Alright, that is good and thick. So we'll take our spoon and spoon it into the hole, using the back side of the spoon actually. That way I can kind of Get it up in there. Oh yeah. Now this stuff is probably going to take about 2 days for it to fully cure, so we'll have to come back to it next weekend, I think, to finish it up. Go ahead and spatula it on. There we go. Look at that. Looks very smooth. So I'm not too worried about going over the edges here because what'll happen when we come back to ferret, I'll have to take off the gel coat in all that area. We'll have to reapply gel coat to pretty much this whole square anyway. So it's not too big of a deal if we end up with a little bit too much epoxy on here. Fine. Super careful, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving any big air bubbles or divots, because those are going to make it harder to get a good smooth finish at the end. But that looks pretty good. So we'll have to let that cure for a few days, I think, and come back to it to finish it up. Alright, so this area has been thoroughly prepped. I've ferreted it, I've put a barrier coat of epoxy on top of it, and now we're ready to gel coat with the Evercoat. I've got a cup already mixed up here, so I'm going to be rolling and tipping that on over the area. If I had an air gun, I would probably want to use that for this size area, but unfortunately I don't, so we'll give it a shot. So now that we've applied our gel coat, we need to put a waxy coating on top of that to allow it to cure properly. I've got my Preval sprayer filled with a PVA mold release formula that has been cut for spraying, so we'll go ahead and give it a spray. That will have to cure overnight, and when I come back tomorrow, I'll be able to start sanding and finishing it up. So our gel coat is cured. All that's left to do is finish it up with a fine grit sandpaper. I'm not going to show that on camera because we've already seen that. So we'll go ahead and cut the episode off here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button down below, and we'll catch you next time.